So we're delighted. But today, needless to say, we are delighted to welcome, as we say, aloha, to our good friend, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, as she campaigns for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination here in this great granite state. If elected, she would make history as the first female combat veteran to serve as President of the United States. But reading her bio, she has a knack for making history. When she was elected to the Hawaii State Legislature in 2002, she was just 21 years old, becoming the youngest member ever elected in that wonderful state. When she was elected to the House of Representatives in Washington in 2012, she was the first Hindu elected to Congress, as well as one of two first female combat veterans elected to the United States Congress, alongside now Senator Tammy Duckworth. She brought with her to Congress extensive experience, both in public office as a Hawaii State Representative and a Honolulu City Councilor, and in military service, having served 2 tours of duty in the Middle East with the Army National Guard. Her service in the military, no doubt, has been an incredible asset to her as a member of the House Armed Services Committee, where she has drawn on her first-hand experience to advocate for our men and women in uniform, our veterans, and our national security. She also serves in the House Financial Service Committee, where she has worked to advance for financial, banking, and housing policies that will best serve the American people. Today, she's running for President of the United States on a platform of ending regime change wars that have cost trillions of dollars, and instead investing in quality health care and education and a green economy. We are truly honored that she could take time to visit Politics and Eggs to tell us more about her vision for our great nation. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Congresswoman from the great state of Honolulu, Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard.
Thank you so much, Jim. Aloha. I'm very impressed and grateful that both of you started out the conversation with aloha this morning. It's very appropriate. Bringing the aloha all the way from Hawaii here to New Hampshire. Really, thank you so much for this opportunity and this platform to be able to have a great conversation this morning about where we are as a country and where I believe we need to go. Just a few thank yous first. Neil, you've been incredible. Where are you? Where did Neil go? There he is. He's still working. Been incredible in helping just to get all of this put together, so thank you so much. And thank you very much, Mr. President and St. Anselm College, for hosting this, as well as the New England Council. Thank you, Jim, for your leadership and helping to support and provide this platform. I also want to say thanks to my friend Ray Buckley. Ray and I served as vice chairs of the DNC together for a few years, and grateful for the leadership you're continuing to provide, especially during this very busy Democratic primary that we have before us. I'll start with aloha, because you opened the conversation with aloha, Neil and Jim, and I think it's a very relevant word to deal with what we're facing in this country. How many of you have been to Hawaii before? All right, good, almost half of you. So you're familiar with the word aloha, whether you've been there or not, but a lot of people don't know really that it means a whole lot more than just hello and goodbye, which is, we use it as a greeting of the day, but there's a reason for that. The real meaning of aloha is I come to you with respect. I come to you with an open heart and with care and with compassion and a recognition that we are all connected, that we are all children of God, and connected regardless of where we come from, our race, religion, orientation, all of these different things that in this current political climate, unfortunately, are too often used as wedges to divide us, to tear our country apart. And it's really disheartening, because this hyper-partisanship and hyper-divisive politics is really undermining the values and principles that we hold dear as Americans, the principles that we hold dear as a country, why we love our country. And so I am really inspired as we go through this campaign. We're visiting different communities, small towns, big cities, in different states across the country, because people are coming out in droves, inspired by this love of country. Yes, disheartened and frustrated with the status quo and where we are, but really driven by this motivation, saying the only way that we bring about real solutions, the only way we bring about real change is by we, the people, standing up and exercising our rights through our democracy to be the change, to be the solution, recognizing that we can't just point our fingers in both directions and think someone else is going to come in and save the day, that our elections are so important because it is when we, the people, stand up that we can really bring about that change that we need to see. And I think it's really important that this be driven by love of country, this remembrance and this recognition that united we stand, divided we fall. And as diverse as our country is in so many ways, whether we're talking about our politics or ideas or the color of our skin, where we come from, how we worship, if we worship, all of these things make up that beautifully diverse fabric of who we are as a country and remind us of how important it is that we stand up and fight for our freedoms, that we take nothing for granted, and that we stand and protect these freedoms that allow us to continue to strive towards that more perfect union that we have. I know one of the main centers of frustration that we see in our current system, why unfortunately in the past we've seen so many people staying home and not voting at all, is that they feel like they've been left behind. That this vision that Abraham Lincoln set out before us of having a government that is truly of, by, and for the people has not been carried out. People feel like there's a few people in Washington who are in positions of great power, who are holding on to that power to serve their own interests while the voices of the people are not being heard. And the consequence of that, and you see this here in New Hampshire, you're very involved in our elections process, that election after election, we find ourselves talking about the same problems over and over and over again, that these problems are not actually being solved. Maybe we put a Band-Aid on it here, or we talk about it for a minute while it's in the headlines, but then it goes away and something else pops up. And meanwhile, the people who are suffering as a result of that problem, whether we're talking about healthcare or immigration, broken criminal justice system, failing infrastructure, climate change, these things capture the imagination or the conversation for a moment, and then it moves on to something else, but the problems remain. And why is that? Why is that? It is because our government is not fulfilling this essential mission of service. Service first and foremost to the people of our country. Now, Jim mentioned his introduction. I'm a soldier. I still serve in the Army National Guard. This past April was my 16-year anniversary, and just a few weeks ago, I went and did my 2 weeks of active Army duty and training, and this was a mission that actually took place in Indonesia. We did a joint training exercise with the Indonesian military, and we had a small group of us who came from the Hawaii Air and Army National Guard, working with officers in the Indonesian military from across all branches of their military. And the focus of this specific training exercise reinforced a principle that has been drilled in me as a soldier for as long as I've been in the military, and that principle was a problem-solving mindset. And it really struck me how essential this is, obviously, for planning a successful military operation, which was our focus there, but how relevant it is to the challenges that we are facing as a country, both in foreign policy as well as domestic policy. A problem-solving mindset. 3 basic steps that go into this problem-solving mindset. First of all, the need to understand the current situation. That we cannot even begin to understand the problem unless we understand where we are. Not looking through things through rose-colored glasses, not looking through things only through a partisan lens, but really being a realist and understanding the situation, the challenges that we face. And number 2, then, understanding the situation, being able to really define the problem. Now, if we step back and really think about the challenges that we face, how often do we see the inability to solve the problem if you don't understand the root cause of it? We've got to understand and define the problem, which leads to the third step, which is being able to identify a clear, achievable goal. Each of these three steps being essential to being able to actually really solve the problems that we face. And, I think there's a lot of different examples that we can point to throughout our recent history, both here at home as well as in our foreign policy. Domestic challenges. Healthcare continues to be the top of mind issue for folks across this country. As we see, even as there has been some progress made, there are still tens of millions of people here who are either completely uninsured, who are underinsured. We still have laws in place in Medicare, for example, that are not dealing with actually solving the problem, serving those who need help the most. I think it's absolutely unacceptable that still, even with the Affordable Care Act's passage, that Medicare is still prohibited from negotiating lower prescription drug prices with these prescription drug companies. The United States is the largest purchaser of prescription drugs in the world. We have an incredible amount of leverage. We should be trying to get the best deal that we can for the people who we are serving. We see these continued challenges with healthcare. We see continued challenges with the immigration crisis we're seeing at the border. Now, again, so much is driven by what's in the headlines, and what we see too often is leaders who are reacting to what's in the headline or to the crisis of the day, and there is a crisis, rather than taking a step back and actually looking at what is driving this, what is causing this problem in the first place. Why are there so many people who are coming to seek refuge at our borders? What is the issue with our borders? How has our foreign policy in the past helped to create this instability? And therefore, what change do we need to make so that we're actually solving the root cause of the problem? How are we dealing with our broken legal immigration system? Getting to the root cause of the problem. Criminal justice reform, the opioid epidemic that is taking so many people's lives. This epidemic continues. We're not getting to the root cause of the problem, and therefore not in a position where we're able to stem this epidemic and then begin to actually prevent people from being harmed in the first place. The list goes on and on. Failed war on drugs, I think, is a prime example. When you look at how these three steps have not been adhered to by our leaders, a failure to understand the current situation, a failure to truly define the problem, and therefore to create a completely unachievable goal, to the point now where decades later, this war on drugs is continuing to be waged, but at what cost and to what consequence? It's had a devastating impact on people's lives, an overburdened criminal justice system, and it's done nothing to stem the tide of illegal drugs in this country. Gun safety legislation. This is another one that is continuing, unfortunately, to stand at the forefront of the challenges we face because of these ongoing tragedies and shootings and murders. But why is it that we have not yet begun to solve this? Why have we not yet gotten to the point where we're bringing down the number of shootings in this country? Because we're not addressing the root cause of the problem and then coming together as a country to be able to solve this. Instead, what we see is one side pitted against the other, pointing fingers, yelling, shouting, screaming at each other, and forgetting the unity that we have as Americans, that when we put all of the divisiveness aside, really what we're left with is who we are as people and the care that we have for each other, recognizing this is about all of us. These challenges that I've just talked about, they impact every one of us, our communities, not just Democrat communities, not just Republican communities. These are things that concern all of us and therefore require all of us to come together to be a part of that solution. You see these same challenges in our foreign policy and the tremendous toll that it's taken on our country. During my first deployment to Iraq in 2005, we were based in a camp about 40 miles north of Baghdad. It was the height of the war, And it was at a time when we were seeing very severe casualties. I served in a field medical unit during that deployment, and every single day I was confronted with the terribly high human cost of war. How many people, Americans, every single day were being injured, killed in combat. This is something that as a soldier and a veteran hits very close to home, especially as we lost friends of ours, our fellow soldiers there. We came home and their families were not able to welcome them home. We see this ongoing toll being taken for those veterans who've come home with both visible and invisible wounds, scars that stay with them for a very long time. I think there's a cost to these failed foreign policy decisions that reaches far beyond those of us who have worn the uniform or who continue to serve. And that's a cost that is paid for by every single one of you who may be watching from home, every single American. But this isn't something that we often think about, but when we connect the dots, we see how these failed foreign policy decisions have a direct impact on every one of the domestic challenges that we face, every one of the needs that we feel in our families and our communities. I served on the city council as well as in the state legislature in Hawaii. So for our local elected officials here, the frustration is often we don't have enough resources, we don't have enough money to pay for the things that we need in our communities. Serving on the city council, you're talking about potholes, sewers, water, safe parks, neighborhoods, law enforcement, firefighters, the basic needs that have a daily impact on our people, our residents, our citizens. And yet, so often we're told there's just not enough money. You've got to squeeze so much out of every single dollar to try to meet those needs. Yet, at the same time, since 9/11 alone, our country has spent over $6 trillion, on wasteful, counterproductive wars that have not made our country more safe. They have not been about national security. They have actually strengthened terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, terrorist group that attacked us on 9/11. They have taken a toll on our men and women in uniform, cost us so many lives. They've cost lives of the people in the countries where we wage these wars. And they have cost us as a people tremendously as we see these dollars being taken out of our schools, being taken out of our healthcare system, being taken out of our communities and our community needs and infrastructure. So you can't separate these issues, which is why it's so important as we talk about this problem-solving mindset. This is the kind of mindset I would bring to serve you as president. Yes, to solve these problems, to build coalitions, to bring people together, to recognize that the only way we move forward is when we move forward together. The experience that I bring to this job of president, and the most important responsibility the president has as commander-in-chief, yes, my time in the military, but also my time in Congress, almost 7 years serving on the Armed Services Committee, on the Foreign Affairs Committee, on the Homeland Security Committee, understanding the importance of our national security, making sure we have a strong, trained, and capable military, and also understanding that our failed foreign policy is undermining those objectives, which is why, as president, I will end these wasteful, counterproductive wars, the likes of which we've seen in Iraq, the war I served in Libya and Syria, and unfortunately the war that President Trump is pushing us closer and closer towards, this war with Iran. A war that would be far more costly and devastating than anything we ever saw in the Iraq war, would take more American lives, would create more refugees, would cost us as taxpayers trillions more. End these wasteful wars. Work to end this new Cold War that we're in with escalating tensions between the United States and other nuclear-armed countries like Russia and China, the arms race that's kicked off as a result, and instead redirect these precious resources that would have otherwise been used on these wars and on these weapons, and use them to serve the needs of our people, because those needs are great and they are pressing. It's time that we get our priorities straight in this country. put the well-being of our people ahead of profits and partisanship and divisiveness, and bring these principles that are at the heart of every soldier, every service member, the principles of service above self, to the White House. Restoring a government truly of, by, and for the people. This is what's driving me. This is what's motivating me, my love of country and my appreciation for who we are as Americans and where we need to go. I think there's nothing but opportunity ahead of us if we are driven by this love and respect for one another, this appreciation for the principles and freedoms that we hold dear, and the work that we have ahead of us to be able to work for the well-being of our people and our country and the protection of our planet. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here, to join you today. I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
We'll do a couple of questions.
Absolutely.
We have students with the mics, portable mics, and if you just identify yourself when you have a question. Maybe I could just ask the first question,
Sure.
Congressman. It's been reported that the president is negotiating with the Taliban in Afghanistan. We have 14,000 troops. He's talking about reducing it by half.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on whether that's a prudent approach, or what would you recommend that we do with Afghanistan, our longest war that we've had?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. It's a great question to start this conversation on, because it's connected to exactly what I was talking about. What's happening now with these negotiations is something that should have happened a long time ago. It's important that we as a country, we as Americans, recognize a couple of things. Number one, we've got to stop trying to be the world's police. It's not working. It's not our role. And we see in examples in places like Afghanistan how costly this foreign policy has been and how it undermines the interests that we have as a country. Even though it's hard to accept for those of us who want to be able to help others, the Afghan people are dealing with a lot of challenges. They have been for quite some time. Ultimately, it is only the Afghan people who will be able to determine their own future. It is only the Afghan people who will be able to root out the corruption that exists within their own government. It is only the Afghan people who will be able to work out the differences that they have in their different form of governance that's very different from ours, as it always has been. So I think these negotiations are very important. They should have happened a long time ago, and we need to bring our troops home from Afghanistan now.
We have Pat McDermott from AARP.
Good morning, Pat McDermott, volunteer with AARP. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for your service both in Congress and obviously in the military. So thank you very much. My question has to do with the high cost of prescription drugs.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned in your remarks allowing Medicare, Medicaid to negotiate for lower prices. If you're elected president, in addition to that, what specific steps would you take to lower drug prices in the United States?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here, and thanks for all the work that AARP is doing. We have a great relationship with our AARP chapters in Hawaii and really, really powerful advocates that I think is important in Washington because it crosses party lines, and you have conversations with people really just about what's affecting our community. This issue of prescription drug prices is one that is way out of control. And it's not only impacting our seniors, it's impacting people who are dealing with diabetes, people who are reliant on life-saving drugs, but are increasingly finding that they can't afford them as these costs continue to skyrocket. And it's only happening here. So there's a couple of different things that I think we need to do. We need to reform our patent system that allows prescription drug companies to continue to hold on to these patents rather than allowing the generic drug companies to be able to come in and to be able to offer them at a lower price. The other thing I think we need to do is to allow for the importation of these drugs at a cheaper price from other countries like Canada. I think the pushback that we often hear is, well, there's a safety concern, is really a very empty counter argument. The bottom line is we've got to make sure that our medicines and our health care is being offered and available to people at an affordable price, and that the price gouging that we're seeing coming from some of these big prescription drug companies is ended. I think there has to be an accountability measure in place and oversight so that this is not allowed to run rampant. We see this happening. We see some accountability in other industries. I think we need to apply those same principles to the prescription drug companies. Thank you.
Other questions for the Congresswoman? Just wait for the mic, sir.
Sorry, hi, Mark Tardif. Those strategic pieces and questions I know you're asked, but how does this conversation start? You talk about divisive, you talk about all of this. When you talk about all the strategic problems, you could talk about solving this, solving this, solving this, but in this environment right now, and you look around, particularly in the Democratic field, you look at what's out there, you look at what's being said, you look at the treatment. What are you going to do to start the conversation, to actually, you know, you talk about bringing together.
Yes.
So,
thank you. This is what's at the heart of what we're talking about, right? When we talk about unity, how does this unity begin in such a divisive environment? There's two approaches that we've got to take. First of all, yes, it starts at the top. It starts with leadership. What kind of leadership would I bring that would help to unify this country? But it also needs to happen within our communities. It can't be a one-sided thing that's dictated from the top. I think we as people need to recognize the role that we need to play, whether it's within our workplace, at school, even at home, where unfortunately we've seen families separated because, you know, mom or dad voted this way and the son or daughter voted this way, and they're pissed off at each other about the way that they voted, and they don't talk to each other anymore. This is where we're at. I've seen this myself, and it's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And where it must begin is with that recognition that the things that we care about, the things that make us angry and frustrated, are things that should drive us to bridge this divide. That we have to start at a place of respect. And this is the kind of leadership that I would bring. It's the kind of work that I've already been doing in my almost 7 years in Congress. When I first got elected to the House, I was a freshman Democrat coming into a Republican majority, brand new member of Congress from a very small state. And when I first went to Washington, I was told by longtime Washington people that don't even waste your time trying to get legislation passed. Just mind your own business, bide your time, and wait for the Democrats to come back and take over. Because you can't get anything done. Nothing motivates me more than people tell me I can't get it done. And so I started thinking about, how do we do this? How do we bridge this divide that would cause someone to tell me that? People who were good intentions and who were trying to be helpful to me. It's through building relationships that start with respect, not coming in with prejudgments and saying, well, you have this letter next to your name, therefore you must be this or that. And so I did something very simple. I started with the universal language of food. And shortly after I got to DC, I called home and I asked my mother, who makes this amazing macadamia nut toffee. I said, can you make 434 boxes of this toffee? And she and my dad raised 5 rambunctious kids, and so she said, yeah, hey, that's a really great idea. I said, no, wait, I'm not done yet. Can you make another 435 bigger boxes of toffee for the staff of every member of Congress? And she paused only for a moment just to say, okay, that might take a little longer. But she said, I'm in. So as she was there in Hawaii, she's stirring 2 pots at the same time and pouring this toffee. My dad playing an important role that he values as the quality control, taking 1 piece out of every pan. But I was in DC while she was doing this and just writing handwritten notes to every one of my new colleagues, learning more about them. Where are they from? What's their background? What are the issues that they care about? And what was incredible was that as soon as we started to deliver these little gifts of aloha to people almost right away on the House floor, which is really the only time in the House that all of us are in the same place at the same time, you see Republicans, senior members of committees, chairmen, making that long walk from the Republican side to the Democratic side saying, where is this new member of Congress from Hawaii? And when finding me, saying, thank you so much, really appreciating that small gesture. And then saying, I ate it all, so I'm going to need to figure out how to get more to take home with me this weekend. But then most importantly, saying, tell me what's going on in your district. Tell me what your constituents are most worried about. What are you working on for them? I'm the chairman of the Transportation Committee. I'm the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee. I'm the chairman of this committee, or whatever. Let me know how we can work together. That came from a very small and simple gesture of just reaching out, saying aloha. That's why we started this conversation today with aloha, reaching out and saying, you and I may disagree on issues, maybe a few, maybe a lot, but I respect you. And let's focus on how we can best work together to serve the American people. Serve the people in your community, my community, serve the people of this country, not just those who agree with us and then say to hell with everybody else, but how do we come together? And that's what has allowed me to be effective throughout my time in Congress. Working with people, Democrats and Republicans, coming together and not being afraid just because we disagree on some or many things, to come together and say, you know what, here's this one thing that we really do agree on. Let's find a way to pass legislation to address this. And one great example of this just happened in Congress not too long ago when we passed the First Step Act, a very important prison reform bill. And this not only happened because progressive and conservative leaders in Congress came together, but it also happened because the ACLU and the Koch brothers came together. And they said, look, we disagree strongly on a lot of things, but we recognize how important this is for every American family, for every community. Let's join forces to get it done, and we got it done. So when we talk about unity and putting the well-being of people first, this is not some utopian pie-in-the-sky, out-of-reach goal. It's happening in small ways and sometimes, in big ways and other times, but it is what is necessary in order for us to deal with these perennial challenges that we face, to finally solve these problems. And it begins with reaching out and treating people with respect, recognizing that aloha, that connectedness, that we are all Americans and that we must stand united. Thank you.
Other questions? Ambassador,
Oh.
are you going to wait for the mic? I mean, we all want to hear your question.
Thank you for being here. Just a simple question,
Yes, sir.
Congresswoman. If you're elected president, will you release your tax returns, and do you think a president should release his tax returns?
Yes and yes. I don't think it needs much more explanation beyond that.
Do we have a young lady in the back here?
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Emily Burns. I'm a student here at St. A's. My question is that during one of the Democratic debates, you spoke to Senator Harris about her dealing of the criminal justice system in California. If elected, how do you plan on reforming the system that we currently have in place?
Thank you. Thank you for this really important question. I just mentioned a bill that we passed through Congress, the First Step Act, that dealt specifically with prison reform and trying to reduce the recidivism rates in this country. What's incredible is to see how in the few short months since that legislation was passed, we've already seen close to 5,000 people be released from prison as a direct result of that bill and be able to reintegrate with their families and with their communities. So we see how great the impact is when we are able to make change, but also how many people are still being left behind because of this broken system. I think one of the first things we've got to address is the failed war on drugs that is causing so much of this overcrowding in our prisons, that's costing us as taxpayers at the federal level as well as at the local level. I just talked to a mayor the other day, and I was surprised. Again, mayors are dealing with these nuts and bolts issues on the ground every day, but he said his number one issue was the need for criminal justice reform, to end the federal marijuana prohibition, because they're seeing their county jails being filled up and so much of their money going towards their local prosecutors and all that is required to fuel this broken system. We've got to end the failed war on drugs. Speaking of bipartisanship, I've introduced the only bipartisan legislation in Congress that would end the federal marijuana prohibition. This would have a great impact on our criminal justice system, while also helping to deal with the opioid crisis that we're facing. In states that have legalized some form of marijuana, whether it be medicinal or recreational, we've seen the data show a direct correlation in those states with a reduction in opioid addiction, as well as a reduction in opioid-related deaths. This also has an impact on our veterans who too often come home dealing with chronic pain because of combat-related injuries or post-traumatic stress, go to the VA and say, I need help, but I don't want to take Oxycontin, I don't want to take these opioids, and the VA docs, because of the federal prohibition, are not allowed to offer or refer them towards any other alternative form of medicine, like medicinal marijuana. And this leads to very, very detrimental consequences. We've got to get rid of and end the private prison industry. I think it's wrong on its face that you have an industry with a business model that is motivated by keeping those cells full. You know, our objective should be seeing how we can reduce crime, how we can reduce the revolving door that we see through the criminal justice system too often, and actually help people make sure that they're being productive members of our society. There's a lot more that we need to do in sentencing reform. We're talking about mandatory minimums. I met a young man from Virginia who shared his own story about how he was charged with 2 marijuana violations. And because of the laws in Virginia, he got 2 back-to-back 5-year sentences because of mandatory minimums. He was a college student at the time studying computer science, and his whole life was torn upside down, and he takes responsibility for his actions. But he ended up with a 10-year sentence because of mandatory minimums. His cellmate was someone who was convicted of homicide, and he got out of prison before he did. The last thing I'll mention is cash bail. I think this is a huge issue that very clearly and unfairly punishes the poor, people who just can't afford to pay their bail, innocent or guilty, they've been charged with a crime, but they're left in jail because they can't afford it, while those who have the means, who may be charged with the same or a worse crime, they're able to pay their bail and get on with their lives as they wait for the criminal justice system to work. This is inexcusable, in my view, and I think this is a major and urgent change that we need to make.
Yes, sir. Just wait for the mic. Identify yourself.
Good morning. I'm Mike Taberski from New England College. Thank you again for your service to our country.
Thank you.
You mentioned the myriad of issues that we need to fix in this country, and also how our society and government is driven by headlines.
Yeah.
We live in a country now where the mass murder of our civilians doesn't even last a couple days in our headlines, including children. So beyond the conversation started, you've already mentioned, what other concrete steps will you take to make this a safer country from mass murder, the murder of children, and those of us who are parents who are afraid of going anywhere nowadays and that issue?
Yeah, thank you. I think we have to look at this from a couple of different perspectives as far as how do we tackle this fear that now exists throughout our country, that no one is safe, that our kids are not safe in school, that our loved ones are not safe at church or synagogue or temple or the mosque. We're not safe going and shopping at the supermarket or Walmart or walking down the street. The recent massacres that we've seen. Legislatively, Congress needs to take action. And there are clear barriers in place to that because of this divisiveness, because it's happening in a very real and honest and respectful way. What we have, unfortunately, is, one side saying there should be absolutely no regulation whatsoever on our Second Amendment rights, and then the other side coming from the extreme saying we need to take away the Second Amendment completely. Both extremes are unfortunately driving the divisiveness in this, when the vast majority of us, the vast majority of Americans recognize that it's a false choice to say it has to be one or the other. that we can and should uphold our Second Amendment rights while also having sensible safety regulations in place that make sure these guns are not getting into the hands of those who would do these mass shootings, who would seek to do harm to others. And you're right about the headlines. It's in the headlines for a day or two, and then the news cycle moves on to Trump's next tweet or whatever the thing is. But also, there are so many people, kids, families, who are losing their lives every day in cities like Chicago and Detroit and others who we never hear of. So this problem is bigger than even, I think, what is talked about or what is realized. So, I think with the recent Texas shooting that we saw in Midland and Odessa, as a clear example of how having universal background checks could have prevented this guy from getting a gun. So this is legislation, H.R. 8, that we've already passed through Congress. It passed with bipartisan support now several months ago, earlier this year, and it's sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk in the Senate, and so far he's refused to bring it forward for a vote. I think there was a glimmer of hope when Trump, in the wake of one of these shootings, said, of course, we should have background checks, and Mitch McConnell said, okay, maybe we'll bring this forward. And unfortunately, now that the spotlight has moved on, they're not feeling that pressure to carry through on that commitment. So that's really where we come in and where we have the opportunity to come in and continue to keep the heat on. To me, there's no excuse why background checks are not mandatory, whether you're purchasing from a gun shop or a gun show or from a private person. When the vast majority of people support this. Other sensible gun safety laws can and should be put in place. It requires the leadership of and the courage of members of Congress to do it. It shouldn't require that much courage, but in this day and age, it does. And it requires accountability for those who fail to exercise that courage. In Iowa a few weeks ago, we had a chance to spend some time with family members of those who have been killed due to gun violence. Some in the very publicized shootings that we've seen, but others coming from the cities that I'm talking about, where their children were killed, and nobody knew about it. Nobody took notice. And it was so powerful to hear in their voices, to see the tears streaming down their face. That really brings this whole thing home, which is this is about our lives, all of our lives. And if we stay focused on that, I really believe that we can change the tone of the debate and the discussion around this issue to one that all of us really care about. We care about our children and our loved ones. And none of us wants to have to live in fear that one day that they won't come home because they've fallen victim to gun violence. I think there's a great example being put forth by the kids from Parkland in Florida. I think too often we sit in our own camps talking with people who we agree with on both sides of this issue rather than having the tough conversations and reaching out to those who are on the quote-unquote other side. But when we do that, I think we realize, hey, we are really all on the same side. We're on each other's side. And these kids from Parkland have been doing that in an amazing way. That as they go to communities, they're not just going to communities that are friendly to their cause. They're going to places that are not, that are quite unfriendly, and dealing with protesters screaming and shouting in their face. When I asked these kids, how did you respond? How do you deal with this? Do you go the other way? Did you cancel your event? What did you do? And in one of these cases, the kids came up and said, no, we went and we picked a bunch of flowers. We started giving them flowers as an opening just to be able to talk and actually listen to where they're coming from. That beginning that conversation, I think, is at the heart of where we need to go, and how we bring about this change is through that dialogue and that discourse. Thank you.
Well, it's a very nice message, and we appreciate you being here because we know you have a busy schedule. Just want to acknowledge the presence of our good friend, the former chairman of the New England Council Board, Tom Rath, one of the best political strategists in all of New Hampshire. Worked on very successful campaigns.
Thank you.
He's a must-stop for any serious Republican candidate. He's worked on President Lamar Alexander's campaign, President Mitt Romney's campaign, President John Kasa's campaign. So he's got one of the best. He's got one of the best minds around. We want to thank him for being here. But we want to thank the Congresswoman for being here. She's got a very tight schedule, but she wanted to make it here to Politics and Egg.
Thank you for having me here.
We thank you for your presence, and I think a lot of the students, as well as a lot of the members of the council and other outstanding citizens here would like to talk to you afterwards.
Of course.
So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We got a picture with you. Give me the mic. Where's the bag? Where's the bag? We have a gift for you. Oh, Mr. President, we're going to give you a tote bag.
Oh, cool.
The zipper.
Perfect.
So why don't you get here? Okay. Oh, boy.
There we go.
All right.
Thank you so much.
You know, we're just going to grab that right now.
Okay.
Okay. Looking out.
Okay, there you go. All right. Got it. Wow.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
It's a great job.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic.
Great job. Nice
Thank
turnout, huh?
you. Yeah, it was awesome. I know, it's great.
See you in the area.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Good. I'm glad.
Who were your friends in the...
You'll never forget your first.
There you go. Who were your friends in the... That's my wife.
Joe Kennedy is my best friend.
Oh, is he?
We got elected the same year.
Did you? Yeah.
He rents a room from us in our house in D.C.
Oh, he does? Yeah.
He is literally one of my best friends in Congress.
Chief Star or
You know,
what?
Jim McGovern, obviously.
Yeah, I'll see him next week.
Closely with him.
Yeah, really good.
You know, Kathleen or Catherine.
Clark.
Like some eggs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got a great delegation
Yeah.
here. I'm getting to know Ayanna. There's
Yeah,
a
right.
few others.
Yeah, but Joe, huh?
You're amazing. Can I give you a hug? Thank you.
Oh my God, are you kidding? You're so sweet.
So appreciate you taking the time to come here today.
The best.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Congresswoman, you're going to need that.
Yes, of course.
I love to talk on Aloha. We have a sticker at our house, Practice Aloha,
Do you really?
from Ocean
So you
Tavern.
get it.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we love it.
Absolutely.
We taught our kids at an early age. They're from Korea. We adopted them.
Amazing.
We've gone back 3 times. Kind of a good Asian culture there. We have Practice Aloha.
Yes.
I have a shirt that says the same thing.
I love it.
It's
That's
awesome.
exactly
It's
what
a great
it is. It's a way
campaign
of life.
slogan these days.
I agree. I agree.
Thank you again for
Thank
everything.
you very
It's a
much.
pleasure.
Appreciate you coming. Thank you. How are you today?
Well, thank you for coming up.
All right. I'm appreciating the beautiful weather you have here right now.
That's great.
While we have it. Thank you.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
So my daughter just graduated from St. A's, and she had a women's empowerment course, and she
Yeah.
did a paper on you.
No kidding.
She did?
That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell her thank you.
Yeah, and thank you very much for your service and all you do.
I'm so grateful
Really
to have the
appreciate it.
opportunity.
Yeah,
So
thank
nice
you.
to meet you.
Yep.
Thank you for coming.
A great escape, buddy.
How are you?
Great. Hey, as a former successful project manager, I love what you say about respect and then problem solving. That's how I got stuff done. Environment, that's great.
It's so simple,
Yeah.
yet it very often is followed, right?
Yeah, and because people have their own agendas.
Yes.
And it's forget your
Or
agenda, let's come
reactionary or all
together.
this other stuff.
What's
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks for
How
coming.
are you?
Good, how are
Thank
you?
you.
I strongly admire your integrity and your military service, and also your debate performance with Kamala. That was
I
great.
appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. How are you?
Good.
I'll be really good at signing
I
rounded
know, it's a
objects
tough
by
thing to
the end of
sign.
this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. It's my honor. There you
I'm
go.
impressed with a flat Sharpie and a white
I'm
outfit.
being
I
so
would
careful
be.
right now.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, you
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
taking
your
that
question. It's a really important one.
I have to
And
tell you, the debate, when that happened, that was one of the biggest moments for me, because that's one of my big issues that I'm looking at.
thank you. It should be for all of us.
Yes.
And it has such a ripple effect in so many ways in people.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
You too.
How are you?
Very good. Thank you. That was very good today.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
I'm glad that you took the time to come. What are you majoring in?
Politics.
Oh, yep. Well, naturally.
Actually, right? We're just get a picture right here.
Yeah, sure.
Wait, we never got a picture. All right.
Thank you
We
very
can get
much.
one.
Appreciate it.
And would I be pushing it if I asked my daughter who lived on the Big Island, was a big fan of yours?
Of course. What's her name?
Annie Cross.
Annie, A-N-N-I-E?
A-N-N-I-E.
Okay, I'm just going to write.
Oh, thank you.
Personalized.
There you go.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
So nice to I'd love to hear how you're going to get the money out of politics, because when it comes to going up against the petroleum industry, toffee's not going to do it.
Oh, no. I mean, that we're dealing with the hyper-partisanship divide.
Right.
Money and greed in politics is a whole different thing. I've got a number of ideas in my plan on how to do that. Ending PAC contributions, prohibiting members of Congress from becoming lobbyists, closing the revolving door that we see throughout government, where you have people working in industry, then coming in and working in the jobs that are supposed to regulate that industry, and then going and getting a big payout when they leave. Closing this revolving door and the legal corruption through legislation. So I'm working on legislation in Congress right now to do that, and obviously as president, this is a huge priority because it is really what's at the root of all of the wrong that we're seeing in the policies that are passed that don't serve us, that serve them.
Great.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Hi.
Good morning.
Should I sign yours first?
I would love if you could sign my book.
Amazing.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, and I'd be honored if you join us at the Problem Solver Convention in November.
I just got an email about that a couple days ago, so I'm hoping that we can make that work.
Fingers crossed.
Do you have a chapter here locally?
Yeah, I work in our Manchester field office on Hanover
great.
Street.
Fantastic.
Hopefully we'll see you in November.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much,
I hope so
Congressman.
too.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for your service both in Congress and
Thank you.
in the service.
Thank you. I'm grateful to have the opportunity. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Hi.
Thank you for your
Thank
message
you.
of unity. We need so much more of that.
Absolutely.
And I hope you will stay in this.
I am.
To the end.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, my friend had to run to class. I
That's
don't know if you
okay.
wouldn't mind signing
That's
too.
what friends are for.
But honestly, thank you so much for showing up. It's great to see a strong female candidate running for president. It gives me a lot of hope as a politics student.
Good.
So.
Well, you guys give us hope. I was with a family of 4 girls and 1 boy last night, and I was asking the little girls, I was like, which one of you is going to run for president? They're like, I will. I just love that, like, of course you will.
Sorry, would you mind getting a
There's not
picture
even a
real quick
question.
with me?
Yeah,
Is that
sure.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Got a lot of work ahead of us. Thanks for everything you guys are doing. Thank you. Appreciate it. How are you?
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
If it's got to do, I got 4.
How many of these do you have so far?
I only have 4.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Wow. Only 4.
Do you mind if we got a picture?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right.
I do a lot with women in tech in the state, so I'm
fantastic.
very anxious to get a woman in the highest office.
Absolutely.
makes
It's
a difference.
unfortunate. I'm a co-founder of a caucus we have in Congress called the Diversity in Tech Caucus that focuses specifically on women, veterans, and minorities in tech, and seeing how can we better encourage more representation
Yep, that's what we're doing.
in that industry.
Outreaching and trying to make as much progress. So
Exactly.
Appreciate the support.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your work.
Thanks.
Hi. Having fun with our weird New Hampshire traditions?
I appreciate tradition.
Yeah.
I went through Ray Buckley's office.
Okay.
And he, chair of the Democratic Party, he
Yes.
have you been to his office?
Not yet.
He should start giving tours because
Really?
it's like walking through a museum.
Yeah,
You
you should
talk about
walk
New
the
Hampshire
hall.
tradition. Yeah, I've been
Go
around
walk
here
the hall,
before.
too. Yeah,
It's pretty incredible.
Do you mind if we take a
Sure.
picture? Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Hi. I'm
I
good.
have two to sign
Sure.
because somebody asked me to.
No problem.
But I enjoyed hearing you speak.
Thank you. Thanks for spending the time and coming here, and thanks for all that you guys do.
Well, thank you.
It really makes a difference.
It was enjoyable. This is the first time I've heard you speak, and I really did enjoy it.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, and
Your picture?
sorry.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hi. How are
Pleasure to
you?
meet you.
Nice
Good.
to meet you.
I'm studying politics and criminal justice here, and I really
Wow.
appreciated your words on
Thank
criminal
you.
justice reform and your positive message.
I think it is a great present-day example of what's possible at a time when so often things seem impossible.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you very
the
much.
two people who led that legislation is a good friend of a Republican friend of mine from Georgia named Doug Collins, very conservative, progressive friend of mine from New York, Hakeem Jeffries, and they were an unstoppable partnership. And they both got attacked by people in their respective parties, but they got it done.
And that's what matters.
That's what matters.
Do you mind if I
Sure.
take a photo? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet
Pleasure.
you. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks for coming.
How are you?
Good, good. And you?
I'm great. Thank you.
You surviving signing round eggs?
I'm getting pretty good at it, I think.
Yeah. That's why I wait until the end of the line. So
Yeah, thank you. Exactly.
Aloha,
How are you? Thank you
Congresswoman.
so much for your question.
The conversation doesn't happen very much
No, it
anymore.
doesn't. It doesn't. But it's got to start somewhere. And it is essential.
You know, I've got my oldest was injured in Afghanistan.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, my youngest he's an oxymoron. He's in government intelligence now for the army.
I've heard that one. Uh-oh.
Can you turn it to gold for me now?
Unfortunately, I would have already been president if I had that
Someone
power.
had to ask. Honestly, thank you.
sir.
It's nice to
really
meet you.
pleasure. Thank you. Hi.
On behalf of ARP, thank you so much for addressing the high cost of prescription drug
Thank
prices
you.
and telling us about your plans to address it.
Thank you. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done, but I think those issues that I talked about, they should be the low-hanging fruit that we should be able to get done quickly, but deal with a lot of the deeper issues as well.
Thank you. Could I get a
Thanks.
picture of
Yes,
this?
of course.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Aloha.
Have a great day. Thank you. Hi.
I'm so grateful.
I'll shake your hand too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming here. I actually conduct research on grandparenting and grand families in New Hampshire affected by the opioid epidemic.
Oh, wow.
And I also work for AARP, so thank you for answering the description of that question.
Yeah, it's. I think it is unacceptable to see how few resources are really being dedicated to the opioid epidemic when it's affecting so many people in such big ways and for such a long time. I'm glad you're working on that issue.
Thank you.
It's something we all need to be able to do more about.
Do you mind if we take a picture?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ryan.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well.
Aloha.
Brother, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I just want to thank you for your courage. I mean, this is such a difficult time, not just in the military, but also having this debate is really important for our kids. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I would love a signature.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.
I was going to ask you about education too, but I'll wait and hear about
My
that later.
parents are teachers. My father-in-law's currently a public high school teacher, so it's something that's deeply ingrained in our family. And
Freshman
it
and
is.
senior,
It's one of
so.
right, exactly. It's again one of those things that we're not. We talk about our future and investing in our future, but we're not investing in our education. So what does that really mean?
Thank you, and
Thank
good luck
you.
to you.
Nice to meet you.
I don't know which way you're going, if it's me or that.
Oh, I thought this side was done. Okay, I'll go to you next.
Thank you for coming.
Thank
and
you.
also thank you for your service. My uncle just came back home from Kuwait.
Oh, wow. How long was he gone for?
About 9 months. But he came home, surprised
That's
us.
good.
Yeah, made sure he
Oh,
surprised me
good.
before I came back home. Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad he's home.
Yes.
And he's safe. Is he in the active military or the National Guard?
He's an active.
Okay.
He was commanding sergeant major.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
High up.
Yep. Well, Tell him I said welcome home. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming,
you very
and thank you so much for serving our country. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be able to have the opportunity to serve in different ways.
Thank you so much. Picture. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
You know, some folks, when they come here, think they're in Vermont.
She was right side of this morning.
All right.
I thought I'd get a bigger laugh in the crowd, but no.
No.
Your policy on pulling out of the wars is absolutely straight on. And only you could speak to that. You're the only one. Well, Buttigieg does, but he
Everyone
doesn't
else should be speaking
You
to
should
it.
absolutely be speaking to it. I mean, I have children. I don't want to send them off somewhere.
No.
So thank you for your service and best of luck.
My honor. Thank you so much. Do you want the egg sign too?
Sure. Thank you.
I gotta make sure I do my job here. I was given a very clear task.
Jim might yell at me if I don't walk out.
Exactly. There we go.
Best of
Thank
luck.
you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hello, Congressman.
How are you?
Good, thank you. I'm just from the AARP, but it was a pleasure to hear you talk. Thank you so much.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here. Thanks for the work you do with the AARP.
Thank you. Would you mind signing?
Sure.
Thank you. Can I bother you for a picture as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
day.
Nice to meet
My
you.
pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you again so much for doing that 60-second interview earlier. You did awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
One of the better ones that we've had.
Glad to hear it. Just makes it easier, right? Because if I keep on going on and on, then you guys got to figure out how to cut it down.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a win-win. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for your help with facilitating
Yeah,
this
of
today.
course.
Hi, Congressman.
How are you?
Good. Great job.
Thank you.
You can sign that. That'd be great. Thank you.
It's an early morning.
There you go.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for serving our country, and thanks for running for president in those most difficult times.
Thank you.
It's I couldn't stand on the sidelines.
Great.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi.
I'm Lexi. I work here at the Institute. So I want to say thank you for coming
Thanks for
today.
putting all of this
Yeah,
on.
we
Really
love doing
appreciate
this. And really appreciate the time you took to do the interview with our students too.
Oh,
we
no,
love doing
that's
that.
important.
So it's
Thank
great.
you.
Yes, please. Yeah. Oh, so we have one to keep here at the Institute. And then I'd like a photo as well.
Perfect. Absolutely.
Thank you. And then I think Brendan forgot to get a photo.
I know. You're not going to leave you behind.
No, exactly. There we go. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Jenna.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I actually have a
Keeping
colleague
this
who
pen
wanted
away
to be
from
here.
both of our clothes.
I appreciate that. I know. I saw you walk in. I was like, we're twins.
Yeah.
I have a colleague who I know wanted to be here. He's a big fan.
Oh,
but he was
wow.
on vacation, so he couldn't come.
Thank you.
I really appreciate what you're saying too about building bridges.
Yeah.
The food is the universal.
Exactly.
Brilliant. That's
Exactly.
genius.
It's so necessary.
For myself as well.
Great to see you.
Are you stealing my?
Yeah, I am. Can we get a picture?
Of course.
Well, thank you so much.
There you go. Thank you.
It's
So
wonderful
nice to meet you.
There you go, Jenna. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
How are
Hi,
you?
Congresswoman. My name is Tori Baramy.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. It's my privilege.
I work for a nonprofit here in the state. We're the largest source of college planning and financial aid advice.
Wow.
So we work with about 20,000 New Hampshire residents each year.
Wow.
So as you progress through the campaign,
Yeah.
think higher ed,
Absolutely.
think workforce,
Yep.
increasing Pell Grants
Yeah.
for low-income and first-gen kids.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Absolutely. I know the cost of higher education is something I hear a lot about.
$1.6 trillion.
It's crazy.
And New Hampshire has the highest priced public
Exactly.
college system.
Yeah.
And depending on who you read, the state's largest, most expensive community college.
Wow.
So combine that with student loan debt and low Pell Grants, it's really
Makes it
impacting.
inaccessible for
Exactly.
more people.
Exactly. So if you could think about that, that
Of
would be
course.
great.
Of course. We're working on
be releasing soon our vision and plan and ideas for how we address this. A lot of focus is often placed on the current debt crisis, rightly so. But like I talked about earlier, we've got to get to the root cause of what's driving the cost of higher education and how do we open it up so it's more accessible using all the technology and opportunities we have to make it so people are able to get the skills that they need.
Exactly.
And focusing on the workforce, as you said, is a critical piece so you can actually earn an income. Take care of yourself.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks for your work.
This was great.
How you doing?
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service. My brother served in the first Gulf War.
Thank you.
Flew C-130s.
Oh, wow.
And so I always respect and appreciate that service. So I work at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center over in the Upper Valley, and I was telling the campaign staff that you should come and give a chat about healthcare.
Yes.
We'd love to have you. So thank you. And I'd love your John Hancock.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Appreciate you taking the time today.
Okay.
Thanks.
My name's Mark O'Donoghue. I'm actually from New York City.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I wanted to get this sign because I'm told this is what everybody does.
This is what everybody does.
But my daughter, who's a millennial,
Yeah.
I had dinner with the other night. I said, we're coming here. She's like, I'm pretty interested in her.
Good.
Yeah, so you're connected.
Yeah,
That's
right
good.
on. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah. Tell her to go to my website. I've got a lot more information
I'm
there.
sure she's read it all.
Okay, good.
Would you mind signing my
Of course.
Where are you off to next?
We're going to town hall here after this, and then we're town hall in Nashville today.
I almost bought a house in North Ware just because the address on the envelope would say Nowhere, New Hampshire.
Good one.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Good luck with the
you.
campaign.
Nice to meet you. I really appreciate it.
Hi there. I'm Chris McMahon. Actually, the tall gentleman is the chairman of my board. So we're, and I just appreciate your service, and I appreciate your calm and quiet approach to. I didn't want to ask a question, but it feels to me like you're getting it done. The way you approach it, I love the idea of getting the right problem, putting it into context, making sure we're solving for the right problem. I think so often government funding comes down to serve problems, not solve them. And I think that pivot to saying, who's in charge of solving, not just serving. And I like to say, we safety nets are great. I'd like to see a trampoline, and that really that is another orientation that we need. Not a net, but a trampoline.
Right.
Not a serve, but a solve.
Right.
And I think finding the right problem can become a really important discussion because we all think we're solving for the right problem, but what assurance do we have that we actually did narrow the right problem down?
Right.
I think that
and getting
approach,
to the point where we solve the problem, and then that program or whatever can end.
Move on.
Get it out rather than
Exactly.
something that becomes perpetual.
You bet.
And then just is there for the sake of being there.
I think what it ties to is your point about those. Some of these initiatives come from a more political point of view, not a solving point of view. And
Exactly.
so it gets blurred.
Right.
And I just appreciate everything you say. You really get a better sense of who you are from these kind of sessions. And my
Then
own
a 30-second moment on a debate.
On a debate.
Stage.
So I just want to say I really
I hope
appreciate
at some
it.
point they use more of these kinds of platforms because I get it. There's a lot of candidates, but there's a lot of differences between us as well.
Absolutely.
And being able to have more of a conversation, I think, is most helpful.
Well, from a not-for-profit type person, your message resonates
I
heavily.
appreciate that very much.
Thanks for your service.
Thank you for sharing that with me. Thanks. Have a great day.
Hey, good to see you. I can't be in the way of this.
Thank you
Okay,
again
good.
for making the
Oh,
time
sure.
to come. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your service.
Oh, you're welcome. It's really nice, obviously, nice to hear you.
Thank you.
Nice to hear your thoughts. Thank you. Free advice is worth exactly what you pay for it. I say that all the time.
Yeah.
But I would say one thing, just one thing.
Sure.
You might put this in your lexicon.
Okay.
When you talk about, for example, the drugs, if you were specific, this is what we're going to do.
Okay.
Okay. This is what we're going to do. Short, to the point, and very explicit.
Yeah.
Because when you walk off this stage, you want everybody in this audience to say, "I want to hear more from Tulsi."
Yeah.
Name
That's
of the
good
game
advice.
in our business.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I'm old and I've been in it a long time.
Absolutely. Thank you. How long have you been in the Senate for?
I've been in the Senate for 22 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for your leadership there.
Well, we're doing our best.
Yeah, this is
But-
good feedback. I appreciate you sharing it with me.
And I'm national chairman of the Council of State Governments.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so,
My father is a state senator in Hawaii.
oh, great.
And I imagine you will see him at a...
We'll see him in Puerto Rico at the National
He'll be
Convention,
there.
hopefully.
Yeah, he'll be there.
Yeah, that's great.
So
Yeah.
I'll tell him to keep an eye out for you. You keep an eye out for the good-looking guy from Hawaii.
Listen, Don Nelson, who's in Hawaii, is a very close friend of mine. I was
Okay.
a basketball coach 100 years ago.
No kidding.
And Nellie, myself, and Satch had a basketball camp.
Yeah.
So we used to have kids from all over the country come to our camp. But
That's
he lives in
cool.
Hawaii.
Oh, no kidding.
You know, Nellie, he lives with Willie Nelson, and the card game,
Oh,
and
yes,
so forth
of
and so
course,
on.
of course.
Yeah.
They're on Maui.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So if you ever see Nellie Katz, you tell him I said hello.
Okay, I
Okay,
will.
great. Good
Thank
luck.
you so
All
much,
the best.
Senator.
Yeah, you
Really
take
appreciate
care.
it.
Thank you.
We'll see you again, I
Okay,
hope.
look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ready?
Yeah.
Do just some press before we go right here. Your phone?
How you doing?
How are you?
Nice to see you.
Hey, great speech.
Thanks for coming.
It's awesome. Yeah, of course.
It might be up there still.